Hello. Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. You s-
Hi,
Hi, Heba.
how are you?
You look gorgeous.
Uh, with my curly hair, with my very summery look.
Yani,
Thank
it looks different. Okay.
It's
Hi,
different, yeah. It's good for summer.
yeah. Ahmed Shalabi, I haven't seen you in so long, and you look quite different. The last time you had hair, more
Why?
hair,
Oh, okay.
and you had a
How can you
beard.
say that?
Sorry.
Sorry. The lockdown effect.
Ah, lockdown effect. I can tell. Tamir, how are you today? Are you feeling better?
You're asking me?
Yeah, Tamir.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm feeling much better. Great to be
Yeah,
with you.
you were
Great
quite
to see
quite
everyone.
exhausted, and you sounded really like, you were struggling. You were coming down with something.
Yeah, I've managed to pull through in
Oh
order to be
yeah.
with you tonight.
I can't thank you enough, really. I mean, I'm
It's a
so
pleasure.
excited, so grateful.
Hi, Tamir. It's been a while.
It has. Hello, Heba. How is everything? Are you still up in
Everything is fine.
Alexandria?
Yeah, now I'm in Alexandria, yes. Between
Lovely.
Alex and Cairo. So
Great.
great to see you.
Just
Likewise.
so you know, you're live on Facebook, so no
Oh,
secrets here out.
okay. Okay, sorry.
Secure. No, you're doing fine. I mean, we're socializing online, which is perfect.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, yeah. It's
And
good to get to
we're,
meet
yeah,
Ahmed for the first time. So
Long
really,
pleasure.
time.
Yeah, first time for me to meet Ahmed.
really. I mean,
Yeah.
where is
Hi.
George's?
Hi.
George was here.
Hi.
I had him like,
He's
yeah,
here. He's
yeah.
here.
Can't see him yet. Hello. Okay, now I can
Hello.
appear. Hi.
Hi.
Well, George was swamped the other day, and
Still am.
aren't we all? I mean, Heba was just wondering, telling me, okay, when are you going to post the announcement? I was like, Heba, I'm trying. Okay.
I'm doing my best.
It's like, I can't. I mean, I was in between, like, I was in between home and like another place. And it's like, I need to just get down, okay, and just sit down and get everything put together. And I
Yep.
really thank you all, really. Evening, ladies and gentlemen. A real pleasure and honor that you all made it under such a short notice, under the pressures of that time of the year, holidays, and the start of a semester. So, I mean, I really can't thank you enough, really. Um, and the struggles of Tamir not feeling well, but thank you for making it today. uh, George, he had 101 different things that he wanted to do at the same time, and still he did not say even no. He didn't even consider anything, except say yes. And this is so professional, so dedicated to our profession and sharing with NileTESOL. I mean, we thank you all. Thank you, George, for that. Hiba, again,
Thank
as
you.
always, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
This
you.
is not your first time, wouldn't be the last time, of course, joining us in our nights, and that's the first in debates. Ahmed, the
Mm.
very first time ever. I've been asking Ahmed, let's say for the past 3, 4 years, to join us in some
Oh,
event, and he's
oh,
always
serious.
busy doing something, right? But he couldn't say no when he is just online. I mean, virtual. I mean, can you say no when you're sitting at home?
No, never.
Uh,
Impossible.
so
Yeah.
I caught you. I finally caught you there.
Okay.
So without further ado, this evening we're discussing this debatable topic. Interestingly, people on NileTESOL, when I just posted a poll this morning, they are kind of divided. Okay, I'm not sure what the latest count is. We're going to look at it, okay, in a few. Mostly, they were on the no side. okay, rejecting the motion, but okay, quite a good number. They were in favor of the motion, and some undecided as usual. All right. Let me say out the motion and then introduce those in favor and those in opposing it. All right. So we're discussing here assessment. It's always that nagging topic to us teachers. I mean, we love teaching, okay? We know how to teach and nobody can force anything upon us here. We can try things out and this and that. But when it comes to assessment, it's always a challenge. And I've been challenged myself with my fellow colleagues during the lockdown. We were all forced indoors. Okay, we could not really do it much. Okay, with assessment. We could not really test students in the sense. In the sense of exams and stuff. I mean, enough pressures. They were bombarded with stuff and tasks and assignments. And then when it came to the end of the course, we were just put in that dilemma. Should we give them mini tasks, bigger research projects or search projects and group projects, individual projects, assignments in the sense, or should we go for a test? And tests in the sense of the very traditional tests, even we go creative with test items and so on. But I mean, how do we conduct tests online? And that was a bigger question mark. And then, okay, when it had to do with final years, they had to go, nobody could find a way. They had to go face to face, and that was a bigger concern. All right, so that's my question to you all before I introduce you formally. Now, tests are mandatory. I mean, when it had to do with when push comes to shove, as they say, we had to go face to face and test students to ensure validity and reliability of grades. Projects we've used, and it was not the best of ideas the way it was implemented. People were not very happy with that. The reliability and validity of things were questioned. We're talking about our schooling systems. We're not generalizing. We're talking about our type of learners, type of students, the way they're raised, okay, when it comes to learning and, doing assignments and so on. So that's a summary of why I've asked you today to join me in discussing together here which side of the fence should I really jump here and support. So now with that introduction, allow me to introduce our speakers. Should I go with the lady first because ladies are first normally, or should we go by for then against? What do you suggest, gentlemen? I had in mind 2 ladies and 2 gentlemen, but one lady walked out on us all because she had some commitment. So it ended up with Hiba against 3 gentlemen. So you're up to it.
First time ever to be outnumbered in our field, right?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, for an experience, right? Isn't that fun?
It's a field that is dominated by women, but then when it comes to assessment,
see how unbiased I am. I'm just, inviting 3 gentlemen when
you're
there
very
are
unbiased.
claims. So when there are claims that we outnumber gentlemen and we are like not giving them a chance to voice their
true
presence, it's not true.
Not true. See?
So, Hiba, first of all, okay, apart from being a friend and colleague, a longtime friend and colleague, she was born and raised in the pearl of the Mediterranean, Alexandria city. All right. And I like her expression, the pearl of the Mediterranean Okay.
Don't we take pride in being born in Alexandria? It's like a different kind of
Yeah,
place.
interesting. Okay. She received her education at Alexandria University, English department. She also completed part of her grad studies in California State University. Um, Interests and passions include applied linguistics, teaching methodology, and of course, assessment. Some of her positions that she took up was assistant director for Middlebury program for teaching Arabic to foreign language learners. Um, I think that was the Middlebury. Yeah, it was partly Alex University and partly Middlebury.
Yeah.
Hiba again worked as a technical consultant in several projects like CIDA, Canadian International Development Agency, USAID. It's a long list, Hiba. And
Just got it
finally,
short.
got it short, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's not brag about this. And now she's the founder, the co-founder of Capital Professional Development Consultancy for developing teachers. So that's Hiba. On the same side, Georges. Georges Compass, director, okay, of teaching, learning program. I remember Yamama University. Okay, that's all I remember, George. Okay, I know George, I mean, for a while now, and I'm so happy to have really, gotten introduced to him. It's like, I think it's months now. The reason why we got to meet each other, it's virtually. I mean, I don't think we've ever met, face to face, unless we may have bumped into each other maybe in one TESOL International or probably, Arabia, TESOL Arabia, because I'm sure is a frequent goer. So anyways, George actually is a main figure on the board of TESOL Gulf. He's quite active in that respect. Not only that, he's a big figure in TESOL International Affiliate group. Would you please help me out here, George, and introduce yourself properly, because I'm not so sure
Right.
I got it right.
Thank you, Hannah. It's always a pleasure to be here. I think, yeah, we must have bumped somewhere, either in TESOL Arabia, TESOL Greece, somewhere, TESOL International. But I think we were more acquainted from the charades, and all of this beauty happened in TESOL and TESOL International. So I'm inside Arabia. I direct the Teaching, Learning, and Development Center at Al Yamama University. I be an assessment coordinator because this is one of my passions. I really like technology, and so I'm kind of like a freak in between the two sections. And again, this.
George?
TESOL Gulf, yes. And I'm from the other side of the Pearl, from the other side of the Mediterranean.
Yeah, that's interesting. Greece. Well, Greece and Alexandria. Okay.
And was in Alexandria 2 years ago. So
Really? Wow. How could have we missed that? Next visit, tour, promise.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll need to.
Now, allow me now. Thank you very much, George. That was so kind of you. Okay, allow me now to introduce the team for those supporting the motion. Mr. Tamir Ismail from the British Council and Mr. Ahmed Shalabi. Well, I know Ahmed Shalabi mainly in his capacity as NileTESOL professional writing special interest group. Okay, he has other capacities that we are going to talk about. Let me first introduce Mr. Tamir Ismail from the British Council. He's the director, head of the unit for testing programs. I'm bad at introductions, Tamir. Now, Tamir in particular here is an esteemed board member at NileTESOL as well, a key decision maker when it has to do with big decisions related to professional development. And of course, the ILS board, which is the conference, International Language Assessment Conference for English teachers. I don't know. I may have gotten it wrong. The one that was
Yeah.
online. Sorry?
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm playing games here. I'm doing charades. Okay, George says, that's all I do because sometimes when you're under pressure, you improvise. So honestly, I'm doing a bit of improvisation here. So excuse me for that. I've just finished a Zoom class 20 minutes ago. So excuse me. Now, Ahmed is a dear friend and colleague, apart from being a co-coordinator in the professional writing committee. Gotten to know him as the founder, one of the two founders of that SIG, Special Interest Group for NileTESOL, with very interesting contributions. Had the pleasure to witness some of those. Ahmed is an instructor at AUC and Esleska. Would you like to elaborate on that? If I've missed anything, please tell me. Ahmed and Tamir. All right. Yes.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. Ahmed.
Maybe Mr. Tamir can start first.
Yes, sure.
Yes. Okay.
If you wish to elaborate on anything I may have missed for introductions before we start our debate. Yes. All right. I got my, chat box open here. And we have a group of 30 participants in the room here, in addition to those who are watching that live on Facebook. So we will be opening the floor for the audience after we make our introductory statements as debaters and rebuttals. I will be involving the audience with contributions within the debate. So it's not like at the very end. So it becomes a little bit more interactive. All right. So I hope we're all fine with that. Okay. So now I believe now the four supporting side, okay, should start first. Tamir and Ahmed, the floor is yours. 3 to 5 minutes here to make your introductory statements why you support the motion.
Okay, so Ahmed, would you like me to go first?
Yes, please. Pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay, excellent. So firstly, I'd just like to thank the NileTESOL Professional Development Committee for hosting this virtual debate. It's great to be part of an esteemed panel with distinguished guests, many of who I know. And I think although we may agree or disagree today, I think the most important thing is that we are having a debate, challenging our existing understandings and also co-creating new ones as well. So, I mean, as we've heard in the opening, is a very controversial topic, and it's something we've all been affected by at one point in time. And for that reason, it elicits quite a strong emotional and mental response. And so I think it's important for us as educators and practitioners to challenge ourselves, to challenge our beliefs about assessment, and be open to hearing different ideas and thoughts. And I myself am willing to change my own views if I'm swayed into a different track of thinking. But the important thing as well is it's not just about views, it's also about evidence, evidence of what works and what doesn't work. And as educators and practitioners, we need to keep aware of what the research is suggesting about assessment and best practice. I just want to say, before I go into detail, that the views that I express are not necessarily those of my organization. They are my personal views. So I just want to put that out there. Now, to start with, it should be said that no assessment regime is perfect, and that we are increasingly of the realization and the opinion that good assessment is multifaceted in approach. We should have a combination of assessment methods that look not only at student attainment, that is where students finish, but also student achievement, that is how far they have traveled or progressed. And so as well, we talk about the importance of formative and summative assessment. Now, this motion is calling in support of testing for summative purposes, and that's the position that I follow. And to sum up my positions quite clearly, I'll be using a saying that I've heard before and that is quite meaningful to me. And the saying is that the right thing is not always the best thing. The right thing is not always the best thing. And in so saying, what I mean by that is that sometimes what we aspire for, so we have our reality and we have our aspirations, but sometimes what we aspire for is not always practical or practicable in a real world setting. And for me, when I say the right thing is not always the best thing, that describes my position on this motion, because I do believe there is a lot of benefit in project-based assessment. And I believe that for students, it may actually be the best thing in the sense that it is fun, they're more involved, they can do it collaboratively, it's perhaps more inclusive. But however, we do not live in an ideal world. As we know, education is very challenging. And in teaching, learning, and assessment, we are constrained by a whole list of factors. And so when designing any system that reaches hundreds of thousands of people, for example, assessment, we need to design practical solutions that can be implemented on a very large scale. And Egypt is your typical example of a large scale system with millions of students in it. And so what I am arguing is that testing is not the best thing, but it is the right thing to do for summative assessment. Now, for all of the criticism directed against testing, and there is lots of criticism, there is, however, a great amount of evidence that suggests that tests are the most effective thing that we have currently in our arsenal for carrying out large-scale assessment. And in testing and assessment, we talk about principles of good assessment. And indeed, there are 3 or 4 or 5, according to whichever literature that you review. According to Cambridge Assessment, which is a UK body as part of the University of Cambridge, in their principles of good assessment, we talk about 5 characteristics. That is valid assessment, reliable assessment, practicable assessment, impactful assessment, and fair assessment. And just to give a very quick example of what we mean for each. So a valid assessment is a test that tests the skill that we are looking to test, okay? For a reliable assessment, it's something that we are able to rate and to score effectively, and then be able to use that scoring to make inferences or judgments about the test, or about the student rather. For practicable assessment, we talk about tests that we can actually deliver at scale and that teachers and administrators can practice without any hindrances. An impactful test is one that can actually help the learner and the student and focuses them on their future as well. So it's part of the learning process. And of course, a fair assessment is one that ensures an equal playing field for all of its candidates. So those are the 5 well-studied and well-discussed characteristics of good assessment. But when we reflect on project-based assessment, we start to run into issues with these 5 characteristics. And when we look at tests, we can actually demonstrate quite a lot of evidence that they meet these 5 characteristics. So I'm going to now just show how project-based assessment creates a number of challenges when reviewed against these 5 characteristics. On validity, well, maybe that's the part they do well on. So a project-based assessment might be great for assessing certain conceptual knowledge and application of skills. If we are getting students to do a task together, then that's a fantastic way to assess collaboration skills and creativity. And those are some of the skills that we are really prioritizing now in education with the 21st century agenda. But one criticism is that students do not know that they are being assessed when they're completing a project, because they only understand assessment from the prospect of a test. That's what they are used to, that's what they expect. And they may not actually prepare well or put in as much time and energy to that project assessment because they don't feel it's a test. When it comes to reliability, I think we start to have even greater challenges with project-based assessment. And we look at some examples of where this is problematic. So in some cases, we have a project where 2 different outputs might be allowed by a teacher. For example, one student might be allowed to express their knowledge through a poster, whereas another can do it through a presentation or an essay or whatever he or she feels is best according to his or her learning style or preference. And that, again, has benefits for the student, but for the teacher and for the assessor, it creates a problem of comparability and how to compare between 2 different outcomes. So it's a bit like comparing an orange and an apple. It's very difficult to do that. And so it becomes very difficult and challenging to benchmark students when the outputs of their work are fundamentally different. A second issue, and I'm sure many of you could imagine this issue, is the reliability of subjectivity in assessing students' work. So if we have the example of a poster and a student shows a really good amount of creativity in their work, to teacher A, they might consider this excellent creativity and award high scores, whereas teacher B might think it's just average and award an average mark. And so you have this real possibility of what we would call inter-rater reliability issues, or in simple terms, lack of consistency in how we award marks. And so standardizing the grading system for thousands of students and millions of students on a national scale starts to become a nightmare scenario. In terms of practicability, I will give a recent example. This was heard in conversation with a parent and also from teachers as well. And we've seen in Egypt challenges to implementing a new system under the current circumstances. And many parents and teachers being confused by how the system works, how it operates, how awards will be issued. So without clear expectations and a clear understanding of how the approach works, it starts to present a practical issue to implementation on the ground. Whereas comparing that to a test, we've used tests for hundreds, if not thousands of years, so everyone is quite clear how a testing system works, and it's clear to everyone which role they play in that system. In terms of impact, I know of a group of students that recently took a project-based assessment, and they all scored 100%. Now, of course, that's fantastic and a very positive thing for the students involved, but it doesn't necessarily help the teacher or the parent in understanding what the student is good at, or what they can do and what they cannot do. And so there are issues of impact around project-based assessment. And in many cases, they're not able to provide students with a direction, or a teacher with a direction of where they need to go next. And also, it doesn't give them a concrete, objective view of how they might perform on a later standardized test. And then lastly, fairness. And I think this is the most pernicious point about project-based assessment. We all know that tests require all candidates and all students to sit and be examined under the same circumstances. And that allows for a level playing field. It achieves fairness and equal opportunity. But in project-based assessment, it's not the case, and we have problems of fairness. So we know that young students will typically seek the help and support of their parents. And in many cases, we have differences in how much parents can support. So some parents are very supportive, others do not have the time. And similarly, we have students from different socioeconomic statuses. So some come from very well-resourced homes with access to computers and access to internet, whereas other students do not have these options, they do not have these resources. And so project-based assessment can create disadvantage for those who are disadvantaged, and it can entrench advantage for those who are better off. And that presents a major issue around fairness within the system. And then, of course, there is the issue of cheating. We don't need to talk too long about that, but we know that with a project-based approach, it certainly opens the gates to the prospect of cheating, whether it's simple plagiarism of ideas and stealing ideas from the internet, or whether it's being part of a group and not contributing within the group because other students have contributed more. So all of those create issues of fairness, which are very severe. So these are some of the compelling reasons why I believe
Amir,
assessment.
You're giving away all your support, and you need it, okay, for the coming part. All right, for the rebuttals. All right, so don't give away all your cards.
I will bring it to a close then. So these are, in my view, some of the core reasons why we cannot take the decision to implement project-based assessment widely and in a light way. We have to consider it very seriously. There is simply not enough evidence to suggest that we can replace it with the tried and tested testing approach. But we may be able to consider it for a formative approach. And that's my view on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tamir. That was quite elaborate. Yeah, I should have really put a cap on the time limit, but it's fine. Okay. So keep it short, Ahmed. Okay, so don't give away all your cards. Keep that in mind because we need to stick to a 4-minute time limit, 4, 5 max. All right, because we have the parts that come later, rebuttals, and you addressing comments from the audience.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Well, while I was really preparing for the debate, so I jotted down a few points, and to be honest, most of the points were covered by Mr. Tamir. So I'm left with just a few points. So I would like just to say that through quick research that I did online, I discovered that summative assessment already includes making portfolios, projects, interviews, even writing essays, standardized tests, of course, and presentations. So projects, or group projects in particular, are really part and parcel of the summative assessment, and it's especially helpful and useful in some stages of education. So the thing is, or maybe some of the the benefits or the positives of a standardized test as a summative assessment tool is again that in the assessment, you're just covering a variety of a variety of question types. So you have the multiple choice, you have maybe to complete the sentence, you have to read, you have to listen, you have to write. So I don't think that in a project-based assessment, you have a chance to really cover a variety of questions. It's just one prompt. So please maybe compile a project about so-and-so, and this is the word limit, these are the limitations, and so on. So I think a standardized test as a summative tool, a summative assessment tool, I'm sorry, is really useful or really good in this aspect, that it covers a variety of questions. Another thing which is really positive about summative assessment as a standardized test is that it covers a bigger span of the curriculum. Whereas in a project, we have only a project maybe covering just one area or just one section or one part of the curriculum. But a test or a standardized test is really helpful in having a bigger scale or a bigger span of the curriculum is covered. I would like also to reiterate what Mr. Tamir has said, that the elements of a summative assessment are authenticity, reliability, volume, validity, and variety, and most importantly, supervision. So when I give students the liberty to just work on a group project on their own, maybe at home or whatever, so the element of monitoring and supervision is not really fulfilled here. So again, the point that Mr. Tamir talked about, which is the credibility, and unfortunately in our society, we heard some about people maybe even paying money to some places or to some parties in order to make the project for them. So again, the point of credibility is in question here. So that's pretty much it, because to be honest, the motion, especially the last part of the motion, says, given our schooling systems and types of learners. So maybe with a different type of learners in another context, so projects could be really indicative of the students' performance, students' level, and so on. However, unfortunately, in Egypt, I don't think that really projects are indicating the level of progress of students and the retention of knowledge in general in whatever grade they are in. For the other points, to be honest, they were all covered by Mr. Tamir. So I believe that this is all I have to say at this point. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Yeah, this is my take on the subject. Yeah. Okay, so is that okay, Hannah? Are you happy that I finished on time? Yeah. Okay. Hannah, sorry, I can't hear you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just saying thank you very much for that, for recapping what Tamir said, and for sticking to the time limit and introducing a few points here. We have audience that is anxious to join, but I've asked them to hold on. We need to listen to our team of, okay, those opposing the motion, George and our dear friend and colleague Heba. Heba, George, Heba, you're a team, you decide. Who's starting? Heba, you're muted.
Yeah, Heba, you can go ahead.
Okay, all right. So I'll try to make this very simple and straightforward. First off, thank you, Tamir, for a great intro. And thank you, Ahmed, for the recapping. And I think, yes, Tamir, you've said it all about assessment testing as a a very valid, reliable assessment tool, especially when it comes to large-scale tests, like spreading out the tool on large-scale groups. And the pillars of assessment: validity, reliability, authenticity, fairness, all of that. But from my very personal point of view, I think we as EFL, ESL practitioners already do project-based assessment somehow. So let's take the two productive skills, speaking and writing, to start with. How do we assess that? We cannot do that through a test. We need either an interview for the oral skills, or maybe writing an essay for writing. So if we have a rubric that measures both the product and the process, then maybe, and we sort of redesign the prompts as well. So maybe we can have an individualized project. It doesn't have to be a group project. So we already do that. And going back to what Tamir mentioned, the main problem is communication with the students and with the community. So the community is not familiar with the idea of projects as an assessment tool. People in general, not just educators, think that projects are for input, could be for input purposes, could be for teaching, learning purposes, but not for. So I think, however, we already do that. And if you want to do a PhD, first off, you would do your comms exam, which is a test. And then you would go through the process of writing your own thesis, which is in a way a project in itself. So if that is the top of the ladder, why cannot we apply that to other groups of students? I agree that it's a challenge when it comes to high stakes exams. And I agree that it's not, and it cannot, the product cannot be standardized. However, the process can be standardized, and at the same time, it can include more students. So students with problems, learning problems or learning challenges could be included when it comes to projects, simply because you design a rubric that would take into consideration the differences and your differentiated instruction, which is now a trend. And again, the 21st century skills that also Tamir mentioned fits perfectly with the idea of projects, because yes, we want to have an individualized product in the end, if we want to use that for assessment purposes. Yes, but then again, students can collaborate at some point in different parts of the project and then come up with their own final product. So if the rubric is designed in a way that would, for instance, include collaboration, and you as a teacher or a practitioner can monitor that, then why not? Why not have projects as an assessment tool, a summative assessment tool that is less stressful? And, well, you know, the HOTS and the LOTS and Bloom's taxonomy, how would you assess the higher order thinking skills in a standardized tests? That's a question. And the other question, or the other point is, so yes, security is an issue, not just for project-based assessment, but also for standardized tests. We've had issues with leakage in Egypt recently, tests. So it's all about community, the awareness of the community, the integrity of the exam, and the importance that the community sees in any assessment tool, not just when it comes to standardized tests. That's one point. And the other point is, if we can do it, if we can do projects with the top of the ladder academic degrees, why cannot we apply that in class, especially that for us as English language practitioners, we already do some sorts of projects as an assessment tool by default, if we want to measure the progress of speaking or writing, sometimes even listening. That's my point. I hope I'm on time. And thank you.
Thank,
George.
thank you. Thank you very much, Heba.
Thank
The
you.
floor is yours, George.
Great. So I agree with pretty much everyone, but I'll agree more with Heba rather than the other two gentlemen. First of all, I
Thank you,
want all of us
George.
to
Lucky you,
team
Heba.
spirit, right? Team spirit. So I think we all need first to think about what is assessment. Why do we assess a student? What is the point of assessment? So are we really looking to see if the students have achieved certain things? Do they know how to do the things that they're being taught, or can they just answer an A, B, C, D, multiple choice, true or false, or comprehension questions? And at the end of the day, how will they use that assessment? I mean, if they're just taking a test, if they're just taking a high stakes test, and who in this room or in general has not seen a person who has taken an IELTS test with a 6 or a TOEFL with 60 or whatsoever, that the two people are totally different. So how did they both get this kind of assessment? How did they both get this score? If you look at the rubric of IELTS or rubric of TOEFL, yes, they can pretty much do the same things. But if you put them in a class, they're totally different. Because is the scale, I mean, can we really assess them through that scale? Yes, there is inter-rater reliability, even in the speaking and even in the writing, but can they actually do the same things? Do they have the same abilities? So going back to what Heba was saying, that students nowadays, and they need 21st century skills. This is what they need. This is what they're going to need in their life, in their jobs, in their all their life. They'll never go to a job and they tell them, you know, now you have to take a multiple choice test. Now you have to take a true or false test. They will tell them, this is your project. This is what you have to do. You're going to be an engineer, a mechanic, a chemist, a doctor. Everything is about process. Not everybody just tests the end result. It's the process. And how will you know what the process is if the only thing that you're being taught is just this is a test, just take the test. It's 20 questions, you have 10 minutes to finish, and that's it. So I think this is something that we need to consider. And then we talked about the community. Yes, the community doesn't know, because does the community know about what we teach in class? How do we teach? We see projects being used in in the first classes of school. You know, you see all those physics projects, the science projects, all of this, that, and the other, and then magically all those projects disappear. They just become endless tests. And what do we want to teach? Do we want to teach to the test? So everything we are teaching our students is about a test. So if you achieve that test and you get a 95 out of 100, then you're successful. But can you implement that practically? Can you go to do a job or learn something and apply it? Or is it just a test score? Is it a number? You talked about validity, reliability. A thing that I have to say is, where is the autonomous learning? Where is the independent learning? How do you learn that through being prepped for tests? If you're working on a project, yes, not everything works perfect in a project, but does everything work perfect in a test? You can do a project on your own. You can do a project with your colleagues, your friends, the people at school. You will take parts of the project. You will be responsible. Nothing is perfect, and assessment is not perfect. Heba talked about security, right? We say that, you know, people can cheat, people can do this on projects. Can they not in standardized assessment? How many times have we heard around the world about, you know, tests being compromised, whole tests being canceled because something happened? So as I keep saying, it's not perfect. So there has to be some sort of a middle ground, and skills that are needed for the lives of the students after school, after they're, you know, they're done with school. They're not being given through tests. A last thing I'm going to say is, somebody said that, you know, about test taking, not everybody is a good test taker. And I will agree, not everybody is good at projects. But I think it's a more kind of a mentorship situation when you are in a project. You have your fellow friends or colleagues, whatever they are at school, or the other students help you. You have the teacher who's the facilitator. the teacher doesn't tell you what you have to do. He or she facilitates the process. There are guidelines, there are rubrics, there are deadlines. I mean, I think it's a very good way of, project management, that it's a skill that you need in any kind of job that you can have in the future. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if there's any kind of profession that doesn't have deadlines, collaboration, working with other people. And there's another part that only has testing. Hannah, that was it.
Thank you very much, George. That was an interesting ending here. Time for rebuttals. All right, so the pro group should be starting by rebuttals here on the opposing side. But before we start that, just I'm sharing the results of the poll. Can you see that on the screen? Can you just click, because I've already shared. Can you click the polling sign at the bottom? Because it's already there. Attendees are now viewing poll results. You all can see that, right? So if you click, it's right next to share screen. So George and Heba, I think you're challenged here to change the audience minds. It seems like people have started up by 70% of agreement with the motion and only 15% disagreement with the motion. And there seems to be 19% of those, or 5 people undecided. All right, those who have taken the poll inside the room. We're going to have a post poll, see if we change that. And just so you know, I did a similar poll on Facebook, but that was like a 50-50. It's like just a difference by one person almost. People are just split around the issue. So good luck with that. Time for rebuttals. We have Ahmed, Tamir, Ahmed, your turn.
Ahmed, would you like to go first this time?
Please, you can start.
Okay, thank you. So I do want to pick up on something that Heba said and maybe challenge it a little. And it is this idea that we are ready, somehow as practitioners, we are ready for project-based assessment. And while I would like to be optimistic and think, yes, we are ready, I would also like to be realistic and acknowledge for many of us, we are not quite ready because our teaching context is overwhelmingly based on textbooks and workbooks, and that's the paradigm that we've been working in for many years. And so we have not reached a stage of implementing project-based learning, let alone project-based assessment. And so I think if we were to seriously consider project-based assessment, then we really need to be embedding project-based learning principles in our classroom more universally. And currently, I think that is just not happening in the way that we might think it is. Currently, teachers are under a lot of pressure to deliver their curricula that have been written for them, developed, and the ones they must teach and use. And still, there is an overwhelming focus on teaching through these curricula. The better teachers, of course, will have integrated concepts of project-based learning within their classrooms, and that is absolutely commendable. But in order for us to reach a stage of practicing project-based assessment very well, we need to think about what we're doing in the classroom in regular lessons and our approach to teaching more generally. And the second thing I'd like to pick up on, and it came out in both Hiba's talk and in as well, is this idea of community. And I think this is actually something we can all agree on, that community is coming out as a strong theme here, that it's incredibly important to engage the community effectively around assessment, to make sure that every one of us, every stakeholder knows his roles and responsibilities. And unfortunately, what we have seen with project-based assessment is that it does create certain tensions with the traditional setup and what we expect. And to give an example, recently in the UK, we had a big national scandal because the national exams for secondary students were cancelled, and instead teachers were required to give a holistic assessment of their students based on the evidence from classroom and the evidence of progress of students. And you could argue that this is a move towards project-based or holistic assessment away from tests, but it created such a scandal nationally, and parents were very angry because the question of fairness comes into play here. Teachers will always want to give their students the best grades possible. And so it becomes very difficult to ensure on a national level that everyone has been given a fair opportunity. So it does create an extra burden. It does create extra issues around fairness. And I think that that's another reason why we need to be cautious about implementing it on a national level, but also on a classroom-based level, where the teacher has maybe too much say about how their students are assessed.
Thank you, Tamir, for that. Interesting to share, like, experiences from different parts of the world. It is a global issue. Assessment is not just us. And looking at different parts of the world and how they dealt with matters, especially that some of our exams are related to big bodies abroad. And I'm sure you've heard about another scandal, the SAT, the SAT exams, and what happened lately. And the lack of control, I mean, leakage, as Hiba said earlier, no control whatsoever over SAT, to the point that they've made us a final decision, no more SAT until further notice, and those children hanging there in the air, and replacing that with something called ACT, which I don't know what this is all about, and nobody is. It's like such a big issue, and almost reaches, it amounts to a scandal, of course. Ahmed, would you like to elaborate on that? Especially you are a teacher, a class teacher, university teacher. How have you dealt with that, especially last semester, and any issues that you may have come across? Anything you would like to rebut from what Hiba and George have raised a while ago?
Yeah, certainly. I have two points to rebut, or maybe rather to comment. Well, ironically, I'm teaching at the AEC, and we are subscribing to the task-based learning and project-based learning. So it's really ironic to be against it in this debate, but I don't know.
Watch out! Watch out!
Yeah.
Watch out! This is being recorded and aired on Facebook.
Yeah,
You don't want to lose your job over it. Nothing is worth it.
Okay, all right. Okay, so the first point I would like to comment on is the point of the community being not really familiar with project-based learning. So this is a very strong point, because with the community not being really aware or fully understanding of the idea of group projects to assess students. So how can the students really benefit from the project? So if I don't know the real objective of what I'm doing, so I will not really benefit from that tool, because George was saying that we need to teach students new skills, and we need them to have more collaboration in learning and everything. So if students are really not fully aware of the objective and the goal behind doing a project-based assessment, so how they will really ever benefit. So it's the same like test. If they feel that the test is really very much stressful, and it entails a lot of studying and maybe spending sleepless nights studying, and in light of all those crammed curricula, So again, with having no clear objective of why am I doing a project and what exactly the project is testing or maybe assessing in my skills. So maybe I'll not be able to perform well even in a project-based learning. But again, I cannot deny that project-based learning is effective sometimes. The other point is it was mentioned by Heba. To be honest, it's about monitoring and supervision, Heba. So as you said, monitoring and supervision is still an area that we need to look at, especially that if students are really not doing the project in the school premises. So in this case, I will not be really able to judge the credibility and on all the effort that has been really exerted to make the project altogether. So again, I would like really to ask you, maybe you have like maybe a view on how to monitor and supervise projects that can be done outside the school premises, because again, supervision remains a big issue, you know. So yeah, so these are my 2 points, to be honest, but the rest I'm with you guys, because I'm already teaching task-based learning and project-based learning at the AUC. So
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for your 2 pence here.
Okay.
I guess now the floor is now back to George and Heba. Heba, George. All right, time for rebuttals if you wish. And keep in mind, the audience will be participating, making comments, asking questions right after you finish.
So George, would you like to go first this time? Or
Yeah, sure, it's okay. I just wanted to say that it's kind of interesting, Tamir's comments about, you know, the scandal that happened. So when, you know, standardized assessment fails, then project-based learning comes into play. I don't think those can, you know, this process or this change of mind can happen in, you know, in a minute. It has taken us how many years to be, you know, acquainted with all the assessment of standardized assessment and testing, and, you know, Cambridge and Oxford and ETS and SATs and all the bodies and everything. So I think that it is a steep learning curve for us that we've been, you know, I've been doing project-based learning for the last 10 years. The organization that I work has been doing it since the 80s, I think. Interlink in the US has been doing it for more than 40 years now, and it works. So because they're preparing students for university, and they're successful. So one thing that I wanted to say is that we talked about community again, and this is something that I'm going to stress a lot. You cannot change the idea of people thinking of standardized assessments as being the best. This is what they learned. This is what they learned when they were students 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, that there is a test. When students first come to our institution and they learn English through project-based learning, they're like, where's the test? Where's the midterm? Where's the final? Because this is what they know. This is what they're used to. So when we tell them, you know, yes, you will be writing an essay, but we will do that in this way, or you will be doing projects for your listening and speaking class. Like, you know, you can go and interview some of your fellow students, or you will interview some teachers, and then you will put this all together. You will put all the recordings, and then we'll make a presentation in the class, and so on and so forth. They don't know. And some of them, they go, they get excited. Some other ones think that, what is this? I don't learn anything. And there are some other ones that, you know, they say, well, yeah, this is okay, but I like to have a test at the end. But the point is, we need to educate. First of all, when we say we're going to involve the community, we need to educate ourselves. If I don't know what project-based learning is, which I didn't 10 years ago, I cannot say, you know, we will go with standardized testing because this is how I learned English, and this is how my grandfather learned English, and that works. We need to educate ourselves, and thank you, Hannah, for giving us this opportunity here at NileTESOL to educate ourselves. Go online, watch a couple of videos and see what project-based learning is about. Yes, and there were some comments in the chat box that we can combine the two. I'm not against combining. I'm not saying that, you know, project-based learning is something that is holy and cannot be touched with standardized assessment. But my idea is that standardized assessment needs to get a little bit lower because it's very high stakes tests that give you a passport. Didn't we see the scandal in the US that, you know, parents, famous parents paid and their children got into university and then they put the parents in jail just because they cheated on the exams or they bought the exams? I mean, I think it has gone over and beyond because it has been a system that has been there forever. And I think that it has gradually, you know, as everything has, you know, that is there forever, there are some parts that are rotten. And for me, and think about it this way, how can you test a student with the same kind of assessment in the US, in Zimbabwe, in rural Russia, and in Thailand? How can a TOEFL test that is a standardized test or an IELTS test that has the same readings, the same listening, how can all of these people have the same exposure? Where do the international, the world English is coming to play? We're talking about British English, American English, Australian English, and South African English. That's it. Where is the rest? How can I make contact with my local English? Saudi English, Egyptian English, Indian English, Turkish English, and so on and so forth. How does standardized assessment touch that? Project-based learning does, because it is a project, but it takes local context. And this is what it assesses. And it is up to us, the educators, to put the international flavor into that. So we don't start international, go local. We start local and we put something international in. That's it.
Thank
Heba.
you for that, George. Just before Heba takes the floor, just a question to specialists here in assessment. I think Tamir can answer that. Are there different kind of versions of IELTS? I only know there are two, the academic and the general, right? So that's the answer to the first question. And I believe, because this was raised earlier, a very good point that you raised, George, is like it's sort of biased toward the British kind of culture, or maybe like, no, like the TOEFL is biased toward the American culture, and it does not really have an international nature, very much like course books, when publishers and authors of these books sort of address concepts that are ESL related rather than, you know, EFL related or international of nature. And I believe the modern versions of IELTS and TOEFL and similar tests have put that into consideration, selecting audio texts and reading texts that have a more generic nature, addressing different cultures, and I believe different accents as well, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like those like foreign accents, as you've just said, you may come across audio recordings in the test with some foreign accent. I'm not sure if this is right. Yeah?
Right.
Seems so? Okay. But just, I did not really mean to jump in and rebut, but it was just a matter of being curious. I'm interested in that kind of area. Anyways, floor is yours, Heba. I'm on your side.
Thank you, Hannah. Okay, so thank you, Hannah. And I'll start by making a very short comment on what you just said. The different accents and the different Englishes that are now being incorporated in standardized tests does not really add the cultural element, because you still ask students to express themselves in ways and use vocabulary items, for instance, that do not really come from their own culture. So it's sort of, we're trying to make the standardized test more culturally sensitive, but still there is this issue. So I'll give you a very simple example. I'll give you from Alexandria. So we have how many types of fish in Alexandria? Now, tens, hundreds, yes? and you want to describe the different types of fish, but you don't know the vocabulary item. So what do? You either describe the shape or you describe, and you take longer time, and then you can be taxed for that in a standardized tests. Whereas if you're doing the same thing in a project-based assessment incident, you will probably take some credit for that. So that's the idea. The idea that you want your students to use language in the most authentic way possible. And you help them get the grades and graduate. That's not it. We want them to learn the language and be able to use the different skills in real life situations. So if project-based assessment can help us identify which language functions, for instance, my students can really do well in, as opposed to a standardized test that will give me a good idea about their grammar or about their speed, that's the kind of thing we're looking into. Now, I will go back to Ahmed's questions and or comments, especially monitoring. Testing and assessment, one of their main concerns would be integrity, I think. And for that, in writing, for instance, we have tens of plagiarism checkers that we can use to make sure that the writing is authentic and it belongs to the student and there's no copying and pasting. So there are ways that you can make sure that the work of the student is authentic when it comes to project-based assessment. However, again, I will go back to the community point. And I think if the community, we do not communicate properly with our community as educators, and if people, as George said, do not understand what project-based assessment is, they will always go to the comfort zone that is not very comfortable just because they're more familiar with it. So one of the ways through which we can communicate, I think, with the community is to get the students themselves involved in selecting the criteria for assessment from day one. So if for instance, my students know today we're going to teach or we're going to learn this and that during our session, and then the following day I would just check on that, and then by the end of the year, I would ask them what criteria from day one, week one, would you like to include in the rubric? And we communicate that. And with the lower grades, I would think if I have the authority, I would include the parents as well in this kind of communication, because that's how we will get people to understand more about project-based assessments and help parents relieve a lot of the stress that the students feel if and when students are asked to do a certain project. So yes, it could be stressful, but there are ways that we can, through which we can, and there are ways that we can help the community understand more about project-based assessments. One last point that I would like to make before Hanette asks or kills me, or taking longer than expected, I think. Again, is about the community. And today I had the honor and a pleasure to be with a group of teachers from different schools, national schools. Some are follow the national curriculum. And I asked them the question, thinking that I knew the answer, but apparently I did not. I asked them about the debate today. I asked them, are you for or against project-based learning as a summative assessment tool? And I was surprised that all of them said we're for project-based assessment tools if and only if the rubric is well designed and the parents understand what is project-based assessment. they said that it gives them the chance to showcase their work throughout the whole year. Otherwise, their work inside the classroom does not really mean anything. And it's not their work. Always credit goes to either the mother or the private tutor, but not the teacher in the classroom. Remember, we are in the post or about to be in the post-COVID era, and hopefully. And like a lot of things that have changed, I think assessment is one of the things that is going to change as well. And what used to be common and popular before COVID-19, especially that now students are 24/7 online. They have information at the tip of the fingers. They don't need to memorize or retain information in their heads to go for a test. They just need to learn how to make use of the information, how to make use of the skill. And this is what project-based assessment can help us do. So thank you very much. Back to you, Hannah.
Thank you, my dear Hiba. All right, time for receiving comments from the audience. But for starters, here we have Ahmed saying, next week, my students are expected to deliver their final projects, and I'll ask them to participate in setting the criteria for assessment. So here is one person learning a lesson here and sort of like trying it out, see if it works for them. All right, good luck, Ahmed. Nisreen and Nisr, you're allowed here to use the microphone. You're unmuted. So
Okay.
Please share your question.
Okay. Actually, I don't have a question. I have a comment. May I say it, if you don't mind? First of all, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Hannah, for this very wonderful topic. Thanks, Mr. Tamir and Mr. Ahmed, Mr. George and Dr. Heba for your wonderful debate. I found the solution in a 4 C's, but not the 4 C's that we actually know. It's the 4 C's that have just been born right now from this debate. We have to release ourselves from our comfort zone of the standardized tests. This is the first C, the comfort zone. The second C is to accept change. We have to accept, all of us, we have to accept change of relying somehow on project-based learning in order to be able to deal with the current situation during the COVID-19 era. Also, we have to apply compromising criteria related to tests and project-based learning at the same time. We have also to manage collaboration. And here collaboration is between many different parties. First of all, the policymakers, the course designers, assessment designers, and teachers as performers in class, coordinators and supervisors as the following up team, school administrators as the one who are to apply this and offer the facilities needed, manage the whole process, parents who are to follow up with their kids at home, and the students who are to perform whatever is needed to be assessed. This is all going to happen for the sake of having autonomous learners, the one who are coping with the whole world issues, and the one who are interculturally competent, and the one who are avoiding having one test and minimizing a possible of cheating. Thank you very much, and hopefully that I have stated what I want to say. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks, dear. You've made the brilliant points here. Let's take more comments here. We have, I think, a comment here from Abigail Ikangu. How I'm to be sure that the projects are produced by the children? A very, a valid concern that we've all had. It's not about just children, all right? About, university learners as well. So anybody would like to take that question?
I mean, I could if you want to.
Please, George.
Right. So the principles of project-based learning is that you don't just judge the result. So let's say that they have a project to do, you will not only assess the end result. So if it's, for example, I don't know, a speaking project or a listening project or a reading project, anything that is any kind of project, there is a process. So the purpose of the instructor, the teacher, the person who is guiding the students, because this is what the project-based learning is all about. The teacher acts as a facilitator, doesn't tell them what to do, but he or she checks the progress. So how can you check if they are doing it? Is you check along the way. So you don't just check at the end. So you don't just, you follow through. There is a process, they come, and there's rapport. There's rapport between the students and the teacher, actually between the group. So you actually even have, roles within the project. Some will be like the spokesperson, other people will have other responsibilities. So it works as a team. So that is going to be, communicated with the teacher. So you check along the way. It's not that you leave them on their own. They do the project for a week or 2 or 3 or a semester or a term, and then you check the end result. You are with them along the way, and you're there when they need support. But this is what I keep saying, is that you're not there to give them the answers. You're there to tell them how to do it. It's like the example of the fish. You show somebody how to fish, and then they know how to fish. That's all I had to say. Heba, any ideas?
Yeah, well, thank you, George. That was very comprehensive. Just one thing, project-based assessment doesn't just fall on you at the end of the year. You, as a teacher, probably know the expected products or how your students write, for instance, or how your students speak. So if you get products at the end of the year that looks very different from what your students have been submitting throughout the whole semester or throughout the whole year, then definitely someone else made that project for your students, right? So as George mentioned, we are actually looking at the whole process, not just the final product. And in addition to that, it will not be the first time your students would do a project at the end of the year. You've seen their products before. You've seen how they write. You've heard them talk before. So you know that if the recording you received sounds a little bit too articulate than normal, then probably that's not them. Or if the banner that they designed does not fit their age group, then has not been done by them. So you have an exemplar from their work against which you can measure whether or not the products are authentic and were done by the students. So
interesting point here, Heba. Thank you for these tips. Our friend and colleague Walid Mandoor had a comment saying that I think he said something about asking learners to create a video explaining what they did. All right. And that could be, it's very much like a viva or, a defense for a thesis where the candidate defends the ideas introduced. So yeah, that's verification that they are the owners of the content. There are several questions. I've put the questions in order. Rania followed by Muhammad Raya, followed by Tehani Shmeis. Okay.
Okay, shall I go?
Yes, Rania.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you, Hanit, for this wonderful experience and this wonderful chance to ask questions, many questions actually. I'm afraid I'm from the side that haven't decided yet whether the text-based assessment is better than the project or not. I'm from the 19% who haven't decided yet. Actually, I have a question for Tamir, because my question was about integrity and credibility, and George and Heba had answered them already about integrity in projects. We can go along the process, not just testing the final product. What about having the test either at school or at home when the students have the access for the internet, doing everything by just a tip of their fingers, and they can have answers from even private tutors, as we have heard about this in the secondary school tests, starting from first secondary and the second secondary classes. They have private tutors sitting with them during the time of the test, and they just provide them with answers. Sometimes they are wrong answers, but they provide them with, you can check the internet, you can consult experts from all over the world. How can you monitor this or control the exam while it is at home, especially at the time of COVID-19, when you can have the exam at home? Thank you very much.
Can someone, yeah, sorry, Tamir, I just wanted you to take over. Yes, please, sorry.
Yes, sure. So I think it's a very, very good question. And unfortunately, it's a question which I don't have an answer for exactly. But I think what we're saying here today, what I'm saying is not that all tests are good in and of themselves. There are certainly examples of very bad tests that do not, measure up well against those 5 characteristics. But what I was arguing is that the best tests allow us to do that in a way that project-based assessments cannot. And I think we have to be very careful with tests. We have to do everything that we can, everything that's in our power to make sure during the administration that there is security, and that security gives us the integrity of the test and the results. So there are absolutely lots of different ways in which tests are administered, and many of them are not up to the standard. I can only speak for some of the tests which I work with very closely and which are administered to very high degrees of test security, but not all of them are. So we cannot just make a general statement and say all tests are good because they are tests. That's not the case. There are indeed many poorly designed tests and many tests that are administered in quite dubious circumstances as well.
Thank you very much, Tamir, for that. Mohammed,
yes.
Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yes, sure.
First, thank you for this fruitful debate. And I think the post-poll, the result will be, most of the people, I think, will be undecided. This for fun. Because I think there are 2 teams who have their ideas very clear. So I guess this, but let's see. First of all, I think there is a magic word, which is, or expression, which is, it depends. And my first question, why A versus B? Why not A together with B? A and B here, of course, is testing and project-based learning. And I don't, project-based learning and testing.
Sorry, what I wanted to say, both is too difficult to manage. And
yeah, I already have an example here in because I teach in Sultanate of Oman, and we have both, as Tamer has already said in the beginning of this debate, that we can use project-based assessment as a formative assessment, formative tool of assessment, formative assessment tool. We already do this in Sultanate of Oman. And also we have testing as a summative assessment. And the only thing they don't have in testing is speaking. But students already have in their formal assessment 2 times to present a topic, and also 2 times to make an interaction between 2 students or more than 2, to choose a topic and discuss it together in front of the teacher. I also have another question. I have the chance or the good chance to travel to United Kingdom and to USA and some Arab countries. So my second question is, are countries like USA, United Kingdom, Germany, France, China not using tests at all, or use just for example, project-based assessment or just testing? And thank you for this fruitful debate again, and thank you for giving me the chance to be with you and to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. George, would you like to take that?
There's a variety. I mean, project-based learning and standardized assessment are, of course, are used out the world, and in the US or Australia or the UK, there are schools, universities, programs that use project-based learning either exclusively or partially, but I think they're everywhere. I don't think there is like a place where there's only one used and the other one is not used, or that, where there's standardized assessment, there's no project-based, or the opposite. So I think there's a great variety. And we also, I'm just going to go back to what I was saying earlier, that it's not something new. Project-based learning is not something that just came up like last year, or it came up just because of COVID. It's something that has been around for at least 40, 50 years.
Thank you, George. Seems like we're going to take the last question from Tehani and make our closing statements. We're already 9:31, like 2 minutes, 32 minutes past the hour, and we don't want to keep our debaters, waiting. But let's listen from Tehani and then give our time to our panel. Okay, Tehani. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute, but I wasn't able to do it. Okay, it's not really a question. It's some kind of a comment and some kind of a wrap up of what I've got from this fruitful debate. I think the majority of us, when we put on the poll and we chose testing, it was because of readiness. Readiness means that is the educational environment in our country and the system and the teachers and the students and the community are ready for that or not. It's not only because we've been always using tests and this is safe, it's also because of readiness. As the tests have been leaked before, also this year when they asked students to do projects and they weren't ready to do it and weren't trained on it, what happened is that the teachers made the projects for them, took money for it, and they submitted. In the places that the students weren't ready to do this, but in some international or some schools that they have been trained all the year for project-based assessment, this was easy, they did it, and they submitted the work themselves. So I think, as George said, it took them many years to reach this. And I also would agree with our colleague who said, why not have the both? Like Tamir said, we can use formative assessment, and this would actually present the project-based assessment to students, teachers, parents, make teachers ready to how to implement this, how to monitor this, how to be sure that this is the work of the students, how to encourage the students to do it. And at the same time, we still have the test which can measure the final results, because still till now in our system, we need a final achievement result that would move the student from one year to another. Gradually, when everybody got accustomed to it, got ready to it, and the system changed to cater for it, I think this is the time to use it. But still, we would go for all what people in the field of assessment said, that don't use one tool, don't depend on one thing. You use variety of things that could help you really understand how those students would end up at the end. I hope that I didn't take so much time, and thank you.
Thank you, Tahani. That was quite elaborate. And again, from somebody who's trained in assessment, is a good wrap up here. I think time for our panelists. And this time, we're going to start with the opposing side first, give them the chance, and then end with the supporters of the motion. Heba, you're muted. George, okay. Heba, George, you decide.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, George. So just food for thought. There are a few words that I would like all of us to think about when we think of assessment in general. Perseverance, integrity, creativity, collaboration, and how these are some of the 21st century skills. So how can we measure that? And as George mentioned, there is nothing, no profession in the world that does not require meeting deadlines and working in a team and being productive and following a process, of course. So how can we measure those very critical and important skills through a standardized test? That's one point. And another point I would like to make before I end today is the community. Remember, community and changing how community thinks is not something that we can do overnight. It takes years, and yes, it's a challenge, but I think it's worth it. And as you all mentioned, I think having a variety of assessment tools is always enriching. So I would end my speech by saying that we should not rely solely on standardized tests. We should not put all the eggs in one basket, as they say. Think of project-based assessment for summative purposes, especially if we are targeting 21st century skills and we have an eye on the job market needs. Thank you very much, George, and thank you, Hanat, Tamir, and Ahmed. It was a pleasure to be with you all in the panel, so thank you.
Thank you, Heba. That was amazing. George, please.
Great. So I'll echo what my co-supporter said. Thank you, Heba. What my idea would be, the closing idea would be that project-based learning is not the comfort zone. So it's not the usual thing that we've all been used to for as much as we can think of. So we might call it that it's difficult for students, but it's difficult and it's more time consuming and it requires more energy, it requires more work from the teacher. Because in order to create the rubrics, in order to incorporate the students in the assessment, in order to do all of these, you just need to revamp your whole way of teaching. It's not just, we stop the standardized testing and we start project-based learning and everything is going to be fun. You just take a book and you just move on. No, because project-based learning is thinking outside of the box. But the hard time you're going to have, it's going to improve your students' 21st century skills. They will learn how to work with others. They will learn how to be a leader. They will learn how to incorporate others in other people inside their circle. I mean, we do projects with, you're with this group now, then the next term you're with the other group, so people get to know each other. They learn different kinds of characters. These are things that they're going to need in the real life. I'm not against standardized assessment, and I've worked for standardized assessment for many years, but it has to change. And change has come because of COVID. You've all seen that, whole examinations were canceled. Universities in the US started accepting students without SAT tests because they couldn't take them. So they did, a project-based learning kind of assessment to them. They had the counselors, they were interviewing them, and this and that and the other. So project-based learning is not just as backup if something bad happens. It can be incorporated. And what my suggestion would be, start small. Put a task or two. It doesn't have to be your summative assessment. Make smaller tasks and incorporate them, and then you'll see how students will benefit, and you as well. Thank you, Hana. Thanks, Heba, Tamir, and Ahmed. It was an honor arguing with you.
Same here, likewise. Interesting that you raised that point of canceling exams and accepting students without SAT. Is there any chance in the near future they might, cancel GRE? You think so? Any chance?
It depends.
Do you see it
I
coming?
don't have any proof of it, but it depends, because who would ever believe that you would go into an American university without an SAT score?
You think
You
maybe
would
some
say that people
natural
would laugh.
disaster? Think of a volcano, maybe an earthquake, a meteor coming.
Or a
comes.
pandemic. Pandemic now is the answer to everything. You can do
Think so?
everything.
We can just bombard them with some pandemic, so GRE would be out of the picture. Yeah, thank you. That's something to look forward to. Thank you, George. Yeah, I'll sleep on that. Our panel for supporting the motion. The floor is yours now to make your closing statements, and then we're going to share the results for the post poll for those who remain in the room. Okay. Tamir, Ahmed. I think Ahmed, you need to start first this time, right?
All right. Okay. For a change. All right. So I would like to thank you all for this really very interesting and enlightening debate. I just need to close with just a couple of points. The first point is, of course, you know that in the context of the Egyptian society, and this is what we have here in the motion. So definitely things will take time. So I believe that standardized test as a tool of summative assessment will really persist until people get convinced that we really need to change. And I think that this change will take some time before the society really embraces the idea of using projects to assess the progress of students. This is the first point. The second point is I don't have anything against project-based assessment. I just have a reservation about the design of the project. So if the project is really, or the prompt is really very well designed, so the project really is covering a bigger span of the curriculum and is really testing and assessing different areas and different skills. So, and again, this objective and the objective of the assessment really is communicated well to all stakeholders. So in this case, I have really nothing against the project-based learning if it is really well designed. And the objective, again and again, the objective is very well conveyed or communicated to all stakeholders. Yeah, that's it. Thank you again, all of you. It was a pleasure, really.
All ours. Pleasure is all ours, Ahmed. Thank you for joining us this evening. Last but definitely not least, Amir, would you like to close?
Sure. So I think what's really clear from our discussion today is that both Hiba and George have spelt out all of the reasons why we should be doing project-based assessment. And there are many reasons. There are indeed several merits to project-based assessment. As we've heard, it's a fantastic way of encouraging the development of higher order thinking skills and then actually being able to measure them. It allows us to have a kind of different relationship with students, and then for students to even work with their friends and their parents as well. So it's a more inclusive type of assessment. And certainly it's more enjoyable as well. But these are all what I would say are benefits for incorporating project-based assessment into our formative assessment regime. And if we need to address anything quickly to enhance students' learning outcomes, it is our classrooms, it's our teaching and learning. And so project-based assessment can be an additional and very effective method in our arsenal of tools and techniques and methods for assessing students for learning. But we need to be very cautious about including it in large-scale nationwide assessment practice that will certainly have an impact on many people's lives, their destinies, and the things that they can and cannot do. And lastly, I would say we need to think increasingly about this idea of equity in a COVID or maybe a post-COVID time. We have seen how the current pandemic has shown our divisions in wealth, our divisions in access to resources, and nowhere has that been more acute than when looking at the public state school education system in Egypt, where students are expected to access resources in order to complete assessments where they may not have the ability to do so. And so we need to find ways that can ensure a kind of common standard for all students, regardless of their geography, regardless of their socioeconomic status and the resources that they have in their environment. And testing is one way to ensure that that takes place in a fair way. But I would like to thank George and Heba for putting up a very strong case for the use of project-based assessment. And I'd like to thank Ahmed as well for also talking about some of the reasons why we believe that testing is the best way to continue in the current circumstances. And of course, a big thanks to you, Hannah, for facilitating this wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamir, and everyone else. Really, you've made this very tough week worth its while. I mean, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have had this interesting debate with all of you. Really, I'm sure, I mean, people are really thrilled about this, those who have participated with us this evening. So thanks again, and hope we keep, meeting together in similar professional events. Before we leave, a couple of things. Sharing the poll results, the post poll, we got like 15 people who voted. Still, they are on the agree side because of their reservations. So yes, people, I mean, this is the context, okay, reality of things in our classes. So still people have concerns. They cannot trust project-based assessment yet. It's a process, and as you've rightfully mentioned, I mean, people have to be trained, and it's a mindset, all right? Until they are there and they're clear what they're doing and that there is equity, as Tamir said, we are having issues with that. I mean, I kept searching my conscience, last semester, struggling with issues, feeling that I'm really being unfair to my learners in assessing their final results. I mean, I felt there is something terribly wrong, and I could not really, just hold on, and just say, well, this is it. I couldn't spot it because people were rushed into the process. Anyways, we gotta really try it out and see where it takes us. But definitely, everyone here has made a wonderful point. The last thing, a group photo for the panelists. All right. So thank you very much. And yes, 1, 2, 3. Smile. We got the recording. We got it on Facebook, and see you later. Very soon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Khamis. Bye. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye, Ahmed. Bye, Heba. Bye, Tamir. You take care.